Hi, and welcome to another episode of Historical Markers. We're down on Tybee Island. I'm actually out here on the beach right now, and we're recording more markers down at the end of Tybee Island. And so let's see what kind of history we can find down here and see what we can learn. Joseph Thomas Gilyard, local resident, donor of the Gilyard Hutment. Thomas Gilyard was born on August 10, 1926, and moved to Tybee Island, Georgia from Hardeeville, South Carolina. In the 1960s, Mr. Gilyard was a former prize fighter with a fourth grade education. He made a living on the island as a truck driver for the city of Tybee Island, where he lived for a portion of his adult life. This exhibit is crafted in honor of Thomas Gilyard. The following panels will introduce the individuals and locations that represent the long-standing presence and broad impact of African Americans as watermen, seasonal workers, residents, and business people. Not all lived on Tybee, but each contributed to the island community in a unique capacity and represent specific periods in Tybee's history. And then the Gilyard Hutment. In military terms, a hutment is a group of huts on an army campsite. However, on Tybee, the word refers to a singular structure. Initially located on the north end of Hutnall Avenue, the Gilyard Hutment was given free of charge to Joseph Thomas Gilyard by Mr. and Mrs. Alvin Cooney, local residents of Tybee. In 1975, it was moved to Mr. Gilyard's property off Wilson and Naylor Avenues, where it served as a recreational and storage facility until 2006, when Mr. Gilyard donated the cottage to the Tybee Island Historical Society. The cottage is believed to be a Fort Screven structure in a style particular to the Army campsite. At some point, this unit was modified to accommodate a room for a stove. The addition leads us to believe that the building may have housed soldiers after World War I, when Fort Screven experienced overcrowding due to the arrival of the 8th Infantry. At one point in its history, the Gilyard Hutment was also used as a teaching tool for over 10 years by the Savannah Technical College and the School of Historic Preservation. This completed building's restoration in 2019 with the goal of anchoring Tybee Island's Gullah Geechee community history. And then right behind this sign is the actual hutment. Brutus was an enslaved man who later escaped slavery in 1861. He expertly traversed Tybee Island's waterways, impressing Union military officers with his navigational skills and his knowledge of the local landscape. In 1861, correspondent Captain Quincy A. Gilmore notes that Brutus was the most intelligent slave I have met here, quite familiar with the rivers and creeks between Savannah and Tybee Island. Corresponding with Sherman, Gilmore notes that he places great reliance on Brutus's statement of how to avoid Confederate guns by waterway, noting that everything he said of Big Tybee Inlet was verified and is moreover confirmed by other slaves at Tybee Island. Like many enslaved individuals, much of Brutus's fate and personal history is unknown. Gilmore's account notes that Brutus escaped slavery in a canoe only 1 week prior to their meeting. Brutus's story represents a long-standing tradition of black men in the maritime industry, both enslaved and free, who worked as highly skilled watermen, fishermen, boat pilots, stevedores, and more. And then Sarah Young. Sarah Young appears in the 1860 census records as a member of lighthouse keeper Edward Stiles' household. She worked as a housekeeper with a personal property value of $300. Also included in the census record as residing at the lighthouse station are Sarah's 3 children, Edward, Laura, and an unnamed infant boy who was 2 months old. They are identified as mulatto, indicating a person of mixed racial ancestry. Sarah's name in the census record, coupled with a significant personal property value, indicated that Sarah is a free person of color. Enslaved individuals routinely were not listed in census records by name. In 1860, over 700 free people of color lived in Savannah. This was the largest free black population in Georgia. The census record is the only record of Sarah's time at the light station. T.J. Carter, builder and businessman. T.J. Carter was a prolific contractor and builder who worked in and around Savannah, according to the 1914 article in the Savannah Tribune. Carter was a native of the city. He graduated from Hampton Institute in 1888 after being trained in carpentry. He was a philanthropist who was featured with his family in the social column of the Savannah Tribune, a deacon at Beth Eden Baptist Church, the president of the Commonwealth Loan and Realty Company, and offices located on West Broad Street. Although Carter and his family were upper middle class, enjoying travel and entertaining, they would not have been able to take pleasure in the structures and facilities he built for the white resort community on Tybee Island. Some of Carter's larger products on Tyhbee included beach cottages for John Butler and several structures at both the German Club and the Seabreeze Hotel. The Tybee Island Historical Society is actively working to identify existing examples of his craftsmanship. And then we have Jeff Williams, head waiter at Hotel Tybee in the 1910s. In 1911, Jeff Williams was the head waiter for Hotel Tybee. As a manager at a popular resort, Williams would be responsible for hiring, training, and supervising the wait staff and his employee, as well as for managing an elaborate dining facility that catered to wealthy white tourists and guests. Annie Dickerson, lodging house owner. Annie Dickerson opened Brown's Cottage in 1913 to provide lodging and catering services for black visitors to the island. Brown's Cottage served as both a lodging place and catering facility for black visitors to Tybee Island, providing preparation of meals for pleasure parties. Located at the Fort Screven Station, this building served as a place of accommodation and entertainment. Tybee Island was known as a white resort area, and black visitors were not welcome to enjoy the beach alongside white tourists. However, Brown's Cottage was a black-owned and operated space that, for at least a short time, stood in opposition of these restrictions. The newspaper distributor, railroad porter, local hero is James Jim Jones. Known locally as Jim, James Jones was Tybee Island's newspaper distributor whose assignments included the Savannah Tribune, the longest-running African-American newspaper in the United States. He was also employed as a porter at the railroad station. In 1921, he was hailed as a local hero when, with the assistance of soldiers from Fort Screven, the men from the convict labor camp, he rescued Mr. D.B. Southcutt, who was recovering from surgery, and $2,000 worth of property from a raging house fire on the south end of the island. Details of the ordeal and Jones's heroic action are mentioned in an article in the Savannah Tribune. Lewis Green and Joseph Sanders, World War I veterans and employees of Hotel Tybee in the 1910s. Lewis Green and Joseph Sanders both listed their residence as Tybee on their draft registration and were reported in the newspaper as men from Chatham County who were drafted from Tybee. However, neither Green nor Sanders lived on the island full-time. Both were employees of C.F. Stubbs at Hotel Tybee. Green worked as a waiter and Sanders as a laborer. Draft cards from this period indicate that individuals often listed their place of employment as their permanent address. Changes of residences and or other mailing difficulties during wartime may have contributed to this trend. Green was actually from rural Cuthbert, Georgia, and Sanders, like many other employees in the tourism industry, was from Daufuskie Island, South Carolina. Private Lewis Green was honorably discharged on January 22, 1919, 2 years after filling out his draft registration. Private Joseph Sanders died of pulmonary tuberculosis at Fort Gordon, Georgia, just 6 months after filling out his draft registration. With little in the way of antibiotics or treatment, respiratory illnesses, especially tuberculosis and Spanish flu, spread rapidly in military camps and claimed the lives of many even before they went to war. Interesting story. We're actually staying here at Hotel Tyhbee. Then we have John Curry, fisherman, expert waterman, World War I veteran, and escort to General Eisenhower. John Curry was renowned for his knowledge of the rivers and waterways around Tybee Island. He was prominent in the oyster industry and a skilled fisherman. During Dwight Eisenhower's pre-presidential campaign to visit Savannah, Mr. Curry escorted the general around the inlet, familiarizing the seasoned war veteran with the local waterways. Writer Tom Smith remembers Curry's nautical prowess in the book Tybee Days. John Curry knew the rivers and creeks well. He rarely got skunked on fishing trips. In bootlegging days, liquor was sent from Bimini to Savannah via the sea buoy and John Curry. Curry, a World War I veteran, was stationed at Fort Gordon, as were Lewis Green and Joseph Sanders. The men on this panel are among over 3,000 black soldiers stationed at Camp Gordon, just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, during World War I. Albertha, Bertha, Lucas Tuttnull, and Edward Bones Tuttnull, fishing industry workers in the mid-1900s. Edward Tuttnull was born in the 1890s on Wilmington Island, Georgia. As an adult, he lived on Tybee Island with his wife, Albertha Bertha Lucas Tuttnull. Before their marriage, Bertha worked as a laborer at an oyster factory and resided in Savannah. Once married, the Tuttnulls operated a fish camp on Chatham Avenue in the vicinity of present-day AJ's Grill. From the fish camp, Eddie Bones rented bateau, lightweight, flat-bottom riverboats that were popular with locals for $1 a day. Bertha assisted in operating the camp and peeled shrimp, packed crabs, cleaned fish, cooked stew, and made she-crab gumbo. She also sold sodas to bateau renters. Because of health challenges, Bertha, although younger than her husband in 1988, preceded her husband by several years. And then we have Henrietta Farabee, a domestic worker from the 1920s to the 1970s. Affectionately known as Henry, Henrietta Farabee was one of many women who worked as a domestic worker on Tybee Island. She was employed by the Bremer family as a nanny and went wherever the Bremer children went, coming to Tybee with the family for the summer. Henrietta, like many black women in domestic service on Tybee, was considered by the Bremer children a member of the family. With limited options for employment, domestic work provided her with a means to care for her own family. This was the reality for many black women in and around Savannah who worked long hours at low wages. It is impossible to name every black woman who labored as a domestic on Tybee between the early resort era and the 1970s. Some summer households, like the Bremer family, employed several individuals. Wealthier non-permanent residents with summer homes frequently utilized working-class people in domestic service. Locals recall that in preparation for the vacation season, domestic workers would take the bus to Tybee to open summer cottages and prepare for the summer population swell. Popular hotels advertise rates for nannies. For example, a Hotel Tybee ad lists a flat rate of $15 per week for nannies to stay at the hotel. Although the larger portion of workers were directly from Savannah, many of them, whether domestic or working in the hotel and tourist trade, came from Fogarty-Hosti Island, South Carolina. Henrietta was from Switzerland, South Carolina, and like a majority of domestic social workers on Tybee, was part of the Gullah Geechee communities of South Carolina and Georgia. The Fogarty-Hosti Cottage, circa 1900. In March of 2010, the Tybee Island Historical Society moved the Fogarty-Hosti Cottage to the property adjacent to the Tybee Island Light Station, and the cottage's restoration was completed in 2011. This move from Butler Avenue to the Tybee Island Light Station was the second move for the Fogarty-Hosti Cottage, which was built at the turn of the 20th century. Its first move occurred around 1920 when it was moved from its mid-island front, oceanfront lot to the corner of 11th Street and Butler Avenue. This cottage is a prime example of a Tybee Island raised cottage, which is evidenced by its wide porches, large windows, and living areas tucked under the house. The primary reason the house was raised, besides catching the summer breeze from the water, was so that the family automobile could be parked neatly away until it was time to head home. The Tybee Island Road not only made travel to Tybee easier, but it also affected the island's architecture. The Fogarty-Hosti Cottage is currently used to house the Tybee Island Historical Society archives and is open to our members by appointment only. And then if we look over here, this one is right beside the house. Illuminating Her History, a look into their lives through documents. Women's history often doesn't get the attention it deserves, and many stories are still waiting to be told. When creating a biography, it's important to gather different types of information, look at the bigger picture, and tackle some tricky questions. Below are some of the documents used in uncovering the stories of these remarkable women. There's a news story and some payroll papers. This is a certificate of death. Surrounding local light stations. The J. Candace Clifford Lighthouse Catalog identifies 25 lighthouse and lightship sites in Georgia, with several located in Chatham County. Notable examples include the Elba Island Range, the Fig Island Range, the Fort Jackson Range Rear, the Long Island Beacons, the Lower Flats Range Rear, the New Channel Range, and Oyster Beds Beacon. It is important to note that not all of these stations were staffed by keepers. Some functioned merely as beacons or day marks, monitored by a keeper stationed at a nearby lighthouse. At right are some of the women who served as keepers of lights beyond the Tybee Island Light Station. And here they list 3 more names of some various people, women who were hired. Did the Tybee Light Station have women keepers? Yes. While many women have worked at light stations since the 1700s, only few became lighthouse keepers with formal federal employment. The Craig Anderson Inventory of Lighthouse Personnel lists 504 women who served as keepers in the United States. Though this list is fairly exhaustive, it is likely incomplete. Most of these women worked in the northeastern region, where both lighthouses and progressive ideas about women's roles were more common. However, a number of women worked in the southeast, especially along Georgia's busy coast. Typically, these women served alongside their husbands, who often held a higher rank. The contributions of these who tended the Tybee Light and nearby beacons have largely gone unrecognized. Despite extensive federal records, many women's stories remain unknown. To the right are women who worked at this station as employees of the United States Lighthouse Service. So here's a list of 5 women that are definitely known to have worked in this lighthouse. We are just outside the lighthouse grounds, and this is Women Who Kept the Lights. The role of the lighthouse keeper was one of the first non-clerical government positions in the U.S. to include women. Although the United States Lighthouse Service mostly employed men, women who obtained these jobs found a unique mix of security, independence, and stability, which was rare for them in the mid-1800s. Many women entered this profession through family ties, taking over for husbands, fathers, or male relatives who had previously held the positions. For some, these roles became necessary as they took on responsibilities after a male relative became incapacitated or passed away. In some cases, illness or loss pushed them into a long-term commitment to the job. For others, it was a temporary duty. Regardless of the situation, the work required both physical strength and mental resilience. By fulfilling their responsibilities, these women challenged the stereotypes of their time, proving their capability in a demanding and often dangerous job that required both physical and intellectual skills. Well, that was another episode of Historical Markers. I hope you liked what you learned in this episode, and we'll be back for another episode, so stay tuned and like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.